But welcome to Time Freedom Lawyers. Welcome to this training on SOPs and specifically how to create SOPs that your team will actually follow. So if you're anything like me, you've either had a hard time creating SOPs or when you created them, your team didn't use them. And as a coach and a mentor and in the legal space, one of the biggest issues I see people face right now is they start to do really good work. They start getting their name out there. They start getting a lot of work. They start hiring a team to help them with the work. The team then doesn't do as good of a job as they do, and they either stall out or they get scared and they go backwards. And that's what I want to help prevent with today's training on SOPs. So let's talk about SOPs first and foremost. Just kind of why we have them, what they are, those kind of things, right? SOPs stand for Standard Operating Procedures, and it's just a standard way that you do things in your office. Now, there's a couple of different thought processes on this, and it's important to understand this in order to truly understand how to create them effectively. When I think of SOPs, I think of McDonald's. McDonald's can, like, no matter where you go in the world, and I don't know if you've had McDonald's outside of the country. I'd love to have you raise your hand and say if you have, but you can get a Big Mac pretty much anywhere in the world, and it will taste relatively the same. Some countries, they may have small tweaks, especially if their health associations don't allow for some of the ways that McDonald's cooks their food. That's a red flag number one, right? But I served a 2-year church mission in Taiwan, and like McDonald's was my taste of home. When I was sick of rice and Taiwanese food, I'd go to McDonald's. I could get the McDonald's ice cream cone and a Big Mac, and it was just like it was in America. Why that's the case is because they have SOPs. Those SOPs explain exactly what to do. And because they have those, they can literally plug that into any language, any skill set. I mean, in fact, right now, McDonald's is almost transitioning completely to robots. So they're even removing people from the equation, and they're getting the exact result every time. Now, I'd love for someone to raise their hand and tell me, do they think that McDonald's is the best hamburger they've ever had? Does anybody say that's the case? Or can you name at least one hamburger that's better than McDonald's? I'm guessing that you're going to raise your hand and say McDonald's is not the best hamburger. So why does McDonald's sell more hamburgers than anyone else? That's the thing I want you to think about here, right? And it's because of the predictability. No, Burger King has better hamburgers. We're even going bottom of the totem pole is having better, right? But like, I mean, personally, I like Five Guys hamburgers more. Most of the local places, I would say, make better hamburgers. Yet McDonald's sells more than anything. It's because of the predictability. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't use SOPs. I absolutely am saying you should use SOPs, especially on the tasks that can be repeated, right? Like a notice of appearance in here in Utah, right? It's the exact same form. You literally just plug in who it is. Anybody could do that. But when it comes to things like legal arguments, and you'll see like Netflix, Netflix can't create an SOP on how to do a TV show, right? I mean, Hallmark has the same storyline in every single movie, but Hallmark aside, if you're doing things that are creative in nature or analytical in nature, you can't use SOPs. You can still use systems and stuff to simplify and speed up the process, but you have to allow for that creative side of things. So that's why I think, honestly, why so many SOPs fail in the legal world is like a motion for temporary orders. Sure, you need to have the same template and those kind of things, and you can do about 80% of the work, but the other 20% requires that creative nature. And if you are too rigid on your SOPs, it does not allow for the creative nature to come out. Like if you went to McDonald's and all of a sudden there was chicken on your Big Mac instead of beef, you would be mad. I'm not saying it wouldn't even taste better. It probably would. But because as soon as you add your own flavor to things, it just kind of changes it, right? So that's the first thing I want you to start considering is, should you even be doing an SOP in this nature? And there's a lot to be said about hiring people that are good at specific tasks. So instead of trying to create the perfect sales script, hiring people that have sales skills or a desire to learn how sales works, that's going to be way more effective. A sales script still helps. And I'm going to talk about how to create SOPs for things that require tact and service. But at the end of the day, the perfect sales script, if someone's just like reading it verbatim, you're never going to get a sale. And that's the first thing. Should you even do an SOP? The next thing I want you to start considering is then, if the answer is yes, this is something that is repeatable, then what's the best way of doing it? And the truth is your team, they want to feel empowered. They don't want to feel like they have no say in what they're doing. So if you give them a step-by-step instruction with no way of deviating from that without getting in trouble, they're going to get frustrated. And that's why McDonald's is switching to robots, is because even the punk 18-year-old kids that have never had a job before, they get burned out real fast. They don't enjoy just flipping a burger the exact same way every single day, right? They want to feel like they're contributing to the company, and so they leave. So that's the first thing, is you want to give them an explanation and help them understand how they can deviate and when they should and when they shouldn't. What that really comes down to is helping them understand why we're doing this. So when I create an SOP, the very first thing I do is I explain why we're putting this together. And what my ultimate outcome is, the desire is. And so like with our intake process, when someone hires us at the very beginning, we have a little process, a little thing that we do during the first 72 hours to really try and wow people. I'm a big believer that first impression matters. And if you can impress somebody in the first 72 hours, they will most likely like your firm, even if you screw stuff up on the back end. This isn't a training about intake and that kind of stuff. I just kind of want to give you some background on what we're talking about. So I have a bunch of things that we do as a firm, including a lot of communication and videos and things that we share that we're trying to impress the current client. But the first and foremost, when I'm talking to my team, is I say, look, the reason we're doing all of this is to make a really good first impression. And so if what's in this SOP is not going to impress this person, don't do it. And if there's something else you can do to impress this person, do it. Because at the end of the day, the most important thing is that this person feels heard and they are impressed with our business and our firm, and they're excited to work with us moving forward on their case. If possible, I want to give them a measurable result, so 30% of leads turn into whatever, right? Give them exact, specific, measurable results of what you expect. But at the end of the day, as long as your team understands why we're doing things and therefore when they can deviate, that's the most important. The next step in creating the SOP is I then, instead of like writing down exactly what should be done, I record myself with videos teaching and training my team on how to do it. And so if I'm actually on it, like I've recorded myself doing sales calls, and I just record it, and you get the little, this is being recorded for quality assurance thing at the beginning, right? And I record it, and I record a couple of the ones that I didn't succeed on and a couple of the calls that I did succeed on. And then we go through and I'll do a recording sometimes of me actually reviewing my sales call and explaining why I did things. But I use it more as like a training where I give them some videos training and explaining, again, why I'm doing things. And not only what I'm doing, but why I'm doing it. Then from there, I actually have my team build out their SOPs. And so they have a lot of say in what they're going to do specifically. Because like when I'm doing my sales calls, someone talks to me and they're telling me like their sob story and what's going on. I often will say, wow, that super sucks. Now, I am the only person that I know that can straight face say super sucks. And if I try to teach that to anyone else, they will not be able to straight face say super sucks. And it's not the phrase super sucks that's getting people to buy our product and service. It's the empathy behind them feeling heard and them realizing, oh, he gets me, that they buy, right? And so when I'm training, I don't want them to say super sucks. I've never met, if you use super sucks in a sales presentation and it works, please let me know, because I don't think it's going to. I've just never met someone that it works for, but it works for me. And so when I'm training my team, I don't tell them to say super sucks. I tell them why I'm saying it and how they can do it. And they end up building out their sayings. That's their language and helps them express empathy. Right? So they build out their own custom SOP. They use the training that I've given them, but they put down the why, or they put down the what they're going to do. Then after they've written that down, we schedule a time for them to meet with me, or at bigger firms, and they'll meet with their manager, right? It doesn't always have to be the business owner. And we go through it together. And this is where I find the most value in this entire process, is not just me training them, but them actually converting what they've learned into an SOP that solidifies it in their brain. And it gives you an opportunity to review it with them. Because I did have a situation where one of my employees cut something out of the process. And it was a very important element of the process. It was a sales thing. And not surprisingly, his results had been really bad. He really struggled to sell stuff with us. And I kind of went through and said, hey, I noticed that you cut this sentence out. This sentence specifically in the sales, this isn't again a sales training, but this is fun things to share with you guys, is people would kind of say what's going on. And he's, as soon as they'd say that, to kind of regain control of the conversation, he'd say, wow, like, express a little bit of empathy. So that super sucks or whatever. But you did the right thing by calling us today. This is exactly what we do. And we're going to take care of you. That sentence is super important in the sales presentation, because when people are calling and looking for an attorney, they want to know that they're going to get help, right? And they're often wondering, should I even be doing this? Especially in the divorce world, right? So by saying you did the right thing by calling us today, it puts down all those barriers. This is exactly what we do. Now they're trying to hire an expert, right? And so by saying this is exactly what we do, they now know we're an expert at what their problem, and then we're going to take care of you. And it releases that tension of them having to worry. So that is a very important sentence, and I use it in most of my sales scripts and across multiple industries. And it was important for him to understand, again, what we do and why we do it. Not surprisingly, he added that sentence in, and that one sentence alone, that was the only thing we changed in his script, doubled his retention rate. It was an important element. And by having him create the SOP and reviewing it with me, we were able to catch why things weren't working. So that's how we do it, right? So let's kind of summarize that. Is one, should you be doing an SOP? If the answer is yes, this is a repeatable task, then record yourself training people on how to do it. Then they take the trainings and they turn those trainings into an SOP. Now, ultimately, for this to truly succeed, what you want to do is you want to boil down the entire process into a checklist. And I think anybody can benefit from a checklist. So to drive this thing home, and how I train my team and how I train my coaching clients, what I tell them is pilots. Pilots require thousands and thousands of hours to become a commercial airline pilot. They are the best of the best in their industry, right? And so this isn't like rookies that don't know what they're doing. Pilots have flown so many times, it's almost second nature to them before they become an airline pilot for a commercial airline. Before they fly, every single flight, they have a pre-flight checklist. And they literally check. Now, they're not the ones down there checking the tire pressure, but the tire pressure is checked on every plane every single time it's taken off. And so my dad was a small, like a Cessna 172 pilot. He went everything up to getting his license, and then we lost our little sister, and he decided that he didn't want his family to lose their dad, and he didn't go in and get his license. But I remember flying with him as a kid. And before we would fly, every single time, he'd pull out his checklist, and we went and we checked the prop and the tire pressure, and we did all of that ourselves because we weren't commercial airline pilots. But you did that before every single flight. And commercial pilots do the exact same thing. Our law firm, before they submit something to the court, they go through their pre-flight checklist, right? And it's not because we suck. It's because we're actually pretty good. And we have a lot of things going on. And because we're good, we have a lot of cases. And we don't want to ever forget something. And so anybody can benefit from a checklist. And it's just a way of making sure that nothing got missed. It's one last chance for you to think. Now, the checklist isn't a step-by-step like instructional guide, right? It's really just, hey, did you do these couple of things? For a long time, when we would file our motions, I just had a thing that said, file your motion for temporary orders. And that's because the paralegal that worked for me had been doing it for over 20 years. My attorney that's working for me had been doing it for over 16 years at the time. So we had a lot of experience. And we knew when we filed motions for temporary orders, we also had to file a request for a hearing. It was just second nature for us. I didn't even think about it. And then I hire a gal that has no experience in the law. And she did a good job. She used our template. She filled stuff out, and I approved the motion, and I said, hey, go file that motion for temporary orders. And she filed it. And there was no checklist that said, is there a request for hearing? And so she didn't file one. She didn't know. And 2 weeks later, I'm like, man, what happened on that Jones case? Like, why don't we not have a hearing? And so I looked into it, and sure enough, she hadn't filed a request for hearing. And that's when I realized, oh, if I had the checklist here on this simple thing, I had it. And so we added it to the checklist, and we filed it and made it work. So sometimes it's fun when you have new team members. You'll end up having opportunities to test your systems and find where they don't work and where they do work. So now, always moving forward, that's a part of our checklist, and anybody who works for us will now have that information. So that's kind of the basic summary on how to create SOPs. But I do want to add a couple of things here. Specifically is for those creative tasks. Like if you have a complex motion that needs a lot of, legal analysis and stuff, right? What I have found, because you can't go in and give them a detailed step-by-step what to do on how to do that. They do need to know how to do these things. The best thing you can do in those situations is shorten the setup phase for them. So like we have here in Utah that we have temporary restraining orders in divorce cases. So if there's an immediate and irreparable harm, you can file it and you get an order right away. The problem is you have to prove immediate and irreparable, which is like a very, very high burden of proof, right? So very, very fact specific. There's no way we could build out a standard SOP on how to do this. So what we've done for these is we have a template, and it goes through, and it's just, we still put in the header and all that kind of stuff. My paralegal can do all of that. And then there's a couple of questions that we've like to gather fact information, and it's a prompt for my paralegal to go in and gather those facts from the client. And she literally goes in and says, hey, just so you know that this is a very high burden of proof, and it's very fact specific. And so for the attorney to be able to draft this document successfully, we need to know the following things. And she just has a couple of questions. She asks the client right there. They answer it. She puts their answers into the little form that we have. I actually just put it straight into the document, to be honest. You could have a separate form, but one thing is better than two, in my opinion. So they go in, they fill that kind of stuff out. Then once that's in there, we just use, honestly, the IRAC format for our documents. So those are the issues, right? Under the rules, we know what the rules are for temporary restraining order. So we throw that stuff that's already in there. And then the analysis section is blank, and the conclusion is obviously blank. Once that's together, then she sends it to my attorney, and they have the information they need so that they can succeed. So it's not like there's a step-by-step how to do the whole thing, but we've front-loaded the work as much as possible and had the paralegal do as much as possible at the beginning, so that when the attorney sits down, they should have everything they need to be able to do it in one sitting. So we've batched the work together there. And then when that's done, obviously we pass it on to the client for review and finalization, and review with the attorney, whatever we need to do from there. The attorney decides that on the back end, right? But we've still front-loaded it. And then before we file the motion, we have a checklist, a confirmation checklist. Did we do these things? Have we done these analyses, whatever? Is it ready to file? And there's basic things like on our checklist, we do a control A, and we go through and we de-highlight everything. Then we hit control A and we turn the text black. Every single document we ever do, because our templates have things highlighted. Our templates have words in red. And even though we know that the text should be in black before we send it to the judge, it's important to do that final step. And anytime we've ever had a typographical error in a document submitted to the court, I can go back to our checklist and realize that if we had done each element on the checklist, we wouldn't have had that error. And so that's why I think those, even in the more complex things that can't have a step-by-step guide, that checklist at the end can be super beneficial. And the last thing I wanted to say is, as you're building your team, initially, everything is going to come from you. You are the expert. You're going to be the expert on sales. You're going to be the expert on intake and client relations and everything, right? And you probably do need to do some trainings here, but don't let that be the case forever. And I think back to like Russell Brunson. He is the creator of ClickFunnels. He's multi-billionaire, probably one of the best online marketers there is out there. He's literally bought most of the forefathers of marketing's companies and brought them into his own company. So by far one of the best marketers I've ever had the opportunity to learn from. If I was able to afford to hire him to run my marketing department, right? There's nothing I could tell him that he doesn't already know. And he would do a significantly better job at marketing than I ever could do. And so as you grow, you need to start asking the question of who, not how. SOPs are the how. You are giving people step-by-step guides on what to do. Where you're going to see the most growth is when you stop asking how to do things and you start asking who would be the best at this. Because if I wanted to win a pickup game of basketball, I would be way better off asking Michael Jordan to play in my behalf, even at 60 years old, and having me do it myself. In most areas of your firm, there is someone in this world, or probably multiple someones, who could do it better than you. I feel like I'm pretty decent at sales. I did a training last week, and if you guys haven't seen it, you should see it, with Candace. She is incredible at sales. As I'm building out my sales process and my intake process for my company, sure, I would do a good job at that. Candace would do a great job. And now it's going to cost money to have Candace do that, right? And you always need to balance the time and value equation there. Start asking the question of who, not how. Guarantee with most law firms, there's someone out there that's better at marketing. There's someone out there that's better at sales. There's someone out there that's better at intake. You are probably going to be the expert on the service side of things, like the actual legal analyses, right? But I bet you could find somebody that could help you deliver your services in a method and in a way that would make your clients happier. More often than not, as an attorney, we're really good at legal analysis and we suck at the delivery. And most of my work in my own firm is on the delivery side. The attorneys that work for me are smarter than me. Guarantee if they did a legal analysis and I did a legal analysis and we duked it out in court, they would win. They're better at that. I'm the boss and they're the employees because I knew how to run the business. And that's what I kind of wanted to end this on is as you're doing these things, focus a lot on the why. Why are we doing these? Should we use SOPs? Should we ask who, not how? And start packaging it together as an entire business. The SOPs are going to help. The who, not how is going to help. But at the end of the day, I think what's going to help you almost more than anything is understanding the entire process from beginning to end. Do you have metrics that help you track those things so that you know if your SOPs are working or not? If you know your team is being successful or not. You're going to find a lot more success with your SOPs if you have an empowered team and you have metrics that shows which ones are working and which ones aren't, and you can fix them on the back end. Or are there, things that you're specifically struggling with, SOPs you've tried to enact, or are there certain team members that you feel struggle with SOPs more than others? Most paralegals and support staff are willing to follow SOPs. Most attorneys are not. And I think part of that is it is hard to have someone tell you what to do. As an attorney, we do have that innate desire to be the best at what we do. And so it's hard to have someone else tell us what to do. So if that's something you're struggling with, I'd love to know. And as we're waiting for those questions to come in, I'll just say, I have found the best way to get my attorneys to do it is one, have very clear metrics on what they're tracking and what you're expecting from them and how they are to report those metrics to you. And then the two is the back end, that explanation of pilots and checklists. That I don't expect, and I'm not saying that they're dumb. In fact, I'm saying that they're experts. And because they're experts and their job requires so much mental thinking, right, that they can't keep everything in their head. And so the checklist is what ensures that they are successful on the back end. So we do have a question here from Pamela. It says, what format do you keep your SOPs in? Word, something else? The best software I've seen, this isn't what I use, but the best software I've seen for SOPs is Trainual. They have a great way of mixing videos and written SOPs to deliver it. Now, that being said, I think that the most important thing to do with SOPs is have it in a format that people are going to use. And I know my team is never going to log in to Trainual. I tried, it didn't work. So in my law firm, we are a Microsoft-based organization. So we use Outlook, OneDrive, those types of things, right? So I have a OneDrive folder that has the office manual, and the office manual itself just has like our company culture and our vision and those types of things in there, right? As it gets to the SOP portion, it actually is just a table of contents. It's in alphabetical order, and it lists all of the SOPs that we've created with a link to the actual SOP, which is another separate Word document. I used to have them all in one document. It just made the document too bogged down, that it was almost unusable. Like it wouldn't even scroll and stuff, right? So by having links to the other documents, it keeps the original document not too long, but still organized. So that way my team knows that they can find anything inside the office manual. Then we have a separate folder that has all of the SOPs, again, alphabetical order there. So they could go there and look for it if they wanted to there. But that's what I found to be the most helpful. Inside the SOP itself, what it is the very first thing is the why statement, why we're doing this. If possible, I also have the very specific metrics of what I consider winning or consider done, like how they can know that they've succeeded and followed through with the SOP. The next section is going to be a link to any of the video trainings that I've done. I do most of my video trainings on Loom. And so it's my favorite way. It's just a cheap software that it'll actually, like if you pay for the paid version, it'll actually create like a transcript and everything, and they can click and actually watch stuff. It's pretty, it's AI summary and stuff. So Loom's probably my favorite way of doing the video trainings. So the document has a link to all of those video trainings. If there's a bunch of them, then I'll actually like do a summary and say like training on this portion of the sales script or whatever, right? So they can see the difference. And then the last portion is going to be the actual step-by-step instructions. And then the checklists I have directly in Clio. So we use Clio as our case management software. So in the task is the checklist. The very last thing of the checklist is the link back to the entire SOP. So that way, if someone gets to the motion for temporary orders and they're going through the checklist and they have a question of what any of those things mean, then they know that they have the link to the SOP. They can take that and go find it. In my coaching business, I do everything through Google. And so it's the exact same idea. I use the Google Drive. I actually think Google is probably a little bit more user-friendly. It is easier to get to those things, but because the law firm's Microsoft-based, I use OneDrive. So it can work either way, Google Drive or OneDrive. But that's how I found it, to have one kind of master document that they can use, and then it directs them to the other SOPs. That being said, my master document was the only document for about 5 years until it got so long and bogged down that I needed the other stuff. I have tried putting the entire SOPs directly into the Clio task. That was not helpful. It just bogged it down and no one knew what was important and what wasn't. And so limiting what's in the Clio task to just the checklist and then the entire training somewhere else seems to be better for me and my team. Last thing I would just say is, as you're thinking through this and as you're building stuff out, let's kind of ask what's next for you and yourself this year. Thank you, everybody. This was a blast to chat to you guys, and we will see you again soon.